Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into something that you specifically requested.
Oh.
Yeah. Florida spot keratopathy, or FSK.
Okay.
It's kind of a mysterious eye condition showing up in, well, mostly cats and dogs.
Right.
Especially in Florida.
Makes sense.
And, you sent over some pretty interesting research on it. And
Right.
one of the things that really caught our eye, no pun intended, is this possible connection to fire ants.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. So in this deep dive, we're going to try to figure out what FSK is, what causes it, and you know what it means for you and your furry friends out there.
Sounds good. So you're right. FSK is often mistaken for other eye problems.
Uh-huh.
So let's be clear about what it actually is. We're talking about those round white spots that you see on the cornea,
Right.
which is like that clear dome-shaped front part of the eye that helps to focus light.
Gotcha.
So getting a good grasp on FSK is essential.
For sure.
Especially for those of us living alongside those fire ants.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that FSK seems to be way more common than we realize.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it often goes unnoticed because it doesn't always cause, really obvious symptoms. But that doesn't mean that it should be ignored, right?
Exactly. And I think what's so fascinating about this is FSK can be like an iceberg,
It's okay.
Like the tip might be just a few harmless spots on the eye,
Yeah.
but sometimes there's a whole lot more going on beneath the surface.
Interesting.
And that's why, really understanding FSK is so crucial. It can help us spot these potential problems early on.
Speaking of understanding FSK, you mentioned one of the articles you sent over. It's kind of a big deal in the veterinary ophthalmology world.
Yeah.
It's from Hebrew University, right?
That's right. And it's actually the largest study on FSK to date.
Wow.
Published just last December in Veterinary Ophthalmology. They looked at 100 cases, 84 dogs, and 16 cats
Okay.
to really nail down what FSK looks like, and who it affects.
Okay, so picture this. You're a vet, and a dog or a cat comes in with these, mystery spots. What's the typical FSK patient like based on this study?
Okay, so, the average dog with FSK was about 6.5 years old, while cats were a bit younger, closer to 6. And here's something kind of interesting. In most cases, only one eye was affected.
Really?
Yeah. Even though multiple spots in that eye were pretty common, it's not like, these spots are spread evenly between both eyes.
So even within the affected eye, are we talking tiny speckles or something more obvious? How big are we talking?
The size can really vary. I mean, imagine a tiny grain of salt on your pet's eye.
Okay.
That's how small some FSK spots can be, but in other cases, they can be as big as a pencil erasure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which would be hard to miss, right?
Yeah.
The study found spots as large as 7.6 millimeters in dogs.
Wow.
And 5 millimeters in cats. And here's the kicker. Those spots don't absorb fluorescein dye.
Okay, back up for a second.
Yeah.
Fluorescein dye. What is that all about?
It's like a highlighter for eye injuries. Vets use it to make any scratches or ulcers glow bright green under a special light.
Okay.
But the cool thing about FSK spots is that they don't light up, which helps vets to know, they're dealing with something different.
So knowing what it isn't can be just as important as knowing what it is, especially when it comes to figuring out, what's going on with your pet's eye. And in most cases, it seems like FSK isn't something that's going to get progressively worse.
That's right. The study found that in the vast majority of cases, those FSK spots, they stayed pretty much the same over time. Only about 4% of dogs and 6% of cats showed any signs of the spots actually getting worse.
Okay.
That's reassuring, especially for pet owners who might be worried that their pet's, eye condition is going to keep deteriorating.
Absolutely. But what about the impact on the animal? Does having these spots on the cornea cause any discomfort or vision problems?
For most animals, FSK doesn't seem to cause any noticeable symptoms. They're not in pain, and their vision isn't usually affected. However, it's important to note that a small but significant percentage of animals did show signs of eye irritation.
Hold on. If it's usually asymptomatic, what's the catch? Why should pet owners be concerned about FSK at all?
Well, so while most animals with FSK were fine, about 18% of dogs and 12.5% of cats in the study showed signs of irritation. Like they might be rubbing their eyes, blinking a lot, or having watery eyes.
Okay.
So while FSK might not be the direct culprit, it's crucial to get those irritated eyes checked out by a vet because it could signal a different, underlying problem.
So even if it looks like FSK, it's important to get a vet's diagnosis to make sure we're not missing something else.
Precisely. It's always better to err on the side of caution when it comes to eye health, right?
Right. Now, for the part we've all been waiting for, that juicy fire-ant connection.
Oh, yeah.
Are you ready to dive into that?
You bet. And this is where things get particularly interesting, especially for you and our listeners. Remember how the study looked at 100 cases of FSK in dogs and cats? Well, they also asked the owners if they had fire ants around their homes.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more. This sounds almost too strange to be true.
Well, the results were pretty striking. Owners of 21% of the affected dogs and a surprising 38% of the affected cats reported fire ants near their homes.
Wow, 38% of cats with FSK had fire ants nearby. That's a pretty compelling coincidence.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't definitively prove a direct link.
Exactly. Well, this is just an observation and not conclusive evidence. Let's just say it adds fuel to the fire, so to speak.
Okay.
There have been other studies that hinted at a possible link between, fire ant exposure and FSK, so this new data makes the connection even more intriguing.
All right, I'm on board with the intrigue. But how could those tiny fire ants possibly cause damage to the cornea?
It all comes down to their venom. Those little fire ants, they pack a punch. Their venom is like a tiny chemical weapon, designed to inflict maximum pain. It's a potent cocktail of chemicals, some of which can actually damage cells.
So if a pet gets, fire ants in their eyes?
It's possible that the venom could trigger an inflammatory response in the cornea, leading to those FSK spots.
Okay.
It's like a microscopic chemical burn.
Oh, wow.
Of course, we need more research to confirm this link, but the evidence is certainly building.
So what does all this mean for our listener who, like many of us, lives in fire ant territory?
That's a great question. And it brings us to some practical takeaways from this research. If you live where fire ants are common and your pet develops unusual spots on their cornea, it's worth, thinking about FSK as a possible diagnosis.
It's like adding another tool to your diagnostic toolbox.
Right.
Knowing about FSK means you're less likely to overlook it.
Exactly. And that can help avoid unnecessary worry and treatments. If your vet confirms it's FSK and not something else, you can usually rest assured that it's a benign condition.
But as always, it's still crucial to get that confirmation from a vet, right? We're not advocating self-diagnosing based on, a deep dive.
Absolutely. Only a qualified vet can properly diagnose FSK and rule out other potential problems. And this study is it's kind of a game changer for vets, too. It raises awareness about this often misunderstood condition. The more vets know about FSK, the better they can recognize it, diagnose it accurately, and reassure their clients.
So you're saying those fire ants we teased might be more than just a nuisance.
Yeah.
Let's dive into that.
Let's.
So we know that fire ants might be linked to FSK. And, these critters are spreading like crazy thanks to warmer temperatures.
Uh-huh.
So does that mean we could be seeing even more cases of FSK in the future?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, researchers are digging into that right now. But, if the fire ant FSK link is confirmed, as fire ants kind of take over more territory, it wouldn't be surprising to see those FSK cases rise, too.
So maybe we're looking at FSK in pets as a sort of warning sign, like an early indicator of how climate change could be, messing with the health of animals and maybe even humans down the line.
That's a really sharp observation, and it highlights why this One Health approach is so important.
Okay, hold up a sec. One Health, what is that all about in this context?
So essentially, One Health is all about recognizing that human, animal, and environmental health are all tangled up, right?
Okay.
Changes in one area can have this domino effect on the others. So think of it like this. Climate change helps fire ants spread, potentially harming animals, as we see with FSK. And eventually those impacts could even circle back to affect human health.
So it's not just about saving Fluffy from a fire ant attack, but understanding how these, seemingly isolated events fit into a much bigger, more complicated picture.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really crucial point, awareness.
Awareness of Don't Leave Me Hanging.
Of FSK, of course. But also awareness of these environmental shifts that are happening all around us.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be tuned into how these changes might affect both animal and human health.
So the more we know about stuff like FSK, the better decisions we can make for our pets, ourselves, and the planet as a whole. Knowledge is power, right?
Absolutely. But let's get back to FSK specifically. What can pet owners, especially those in fire ant zones, do to, protect their furry friends?
Yeah. Give us the lowdown. What What practical steps can we take?
Okay, well, the first line of defense is being vigilant about fire ant mounds in your yard and taking steps to get rid of them. There are all sorts of products out there for fire ant control, but, always go for the pet-friendly options and follow the instructions carefully.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine keeping a close eye on your pet when they're outside, especially in areas where, fire ants might be hanging out, is a good idea too, right?
Absolutely. If your pet's pawing at their face or showing signs of, eye irritation after being outside, it's always best to, play it safe and get them checked out by your vet. Remember those signs we discussed earlier? Rubbing their eyes, excessive blinking, or watery eyes. Those warrant a trip to the vet, especially in fire ant territory.
Okay, we've talked about what FSK is, why it matters, and how to, minimize the risks. But you mentioned earlier the importance of, careful observation.
Yes.
What exactly should pet owners be looking for? I mean, what should raise a red flag when it comes to our pet's eyes?
That's a really key point because, while most cases of FSK are asymptomatic, being attuned to any changes in your pet's eyes can help catch problems early. So what should you be looking for? Well, keep an eye out for any unusual spots or cloudiness on the cornea.
Okay, any kind of spot, or do FSK spots have, a specific look?
They're typically round and white, but as we discussed, they can range in size from tiny, grains of salt to, larger, more noticeable patches. And remember, they don't absorb fluorescein dye. That's a big clue for vets. It's like trying to color a water balloon with a marker. The dye just slides right off those FSK spots because they have a different structure than normal corneal tissue.
Interesting. So if you see something suspicious, even if your pet isn't showing any symptoms, it's best to contact your vet, right?
Exactly. Early detection is always best when it comes to eye health. Think of it this way. You wouldn't wait until your car, completely breaks down to take it to the mechanic. Regular checkups and being attuned to any warning signs can help prevent bigger problems down the line. The same goes for your pet's eyes.
Okay, I see what you mean. It's about being proactive and not waiting until things get really bad. Yeah. But isn't it possible that, some pets might be around fire ants without actually coming into contact with them? How do we know for sure that fire ants are the culprit and not just a coincidence?
That's a fair point. You're right. We can't completely rule out other factors. Just because fire ants are present doesn't mean they're, directly causing FSK in every case. It's possible that some pets might be more susceptible to developing FSK due to their genetics, underlying health conditions or other environmental factors we haven't even considered yet.
So the fire ant connection is still a bit of a mystery, but it's a compelling one. What I'm taking away from all of this is that even though FSK is usually harmless on its own, it's a reminder that our pet's health is, intricately connected to the environment. Paying attention to seemingly small details, like those little white spots on the cornea, can open our eyes to bigger trends and connections.
That's a brilliant way to put it. And that awareness can empower us to be better advocates for our pets, ourselves, and the planet. Speaking of bigger trends, the fire ant connection does make you wonder.
We've talked about those fire ants marching northward, and potentially bringing more FSK cases with them. But could there be other things at play here too? Could, changes in our environment or even our pets' lifestyles contribute to FSK?
That's an excellent question, and it really highlights how much we still don't know about this condition. The fire ant link is fascinating, but it's entirely possible that other environmental factors could be involved too.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about things like air pollution.
Okay.
Or exposure to, certain chemicals. Even changes in diet could play a role. We already know these things can affect eye health in humans, so it's not far-fetched to think they could be impacting our furry friends too.
So it's like a big puzzle, and we've only just started putting the pieces together.
Exactly. And that's why more research is so crucial. We need more studies to explore all these possibilities and really untangle how genetics, environment, and lifestyle all interact.
Maybe FSK isn't just a random eye condition. What if it's a clue that can help us understand these bigger environmental health issues?
Now you're thinking like a true scientist. That's the beauty of scientific inquiry. It often leads us in unexpected directions and opens up these whole new avenues to explore.
I'm definitely keeping an eye on this research to see what they discover next. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listener with before we wrap up this deep dive into FSK?
Just this. Stay curious, stay observant, and never underestimate the power of asking questions. The more we understand the world around us, the better equipped we are to protect the health of ourselves, our pets, and the planet.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Florida spot keratopathy. We'll catch you next time for another adventure in knowledge exploration.